Property outline, closing costs. So the main thing to remember here is that credits are going to be good for each party and debits are going to be bad for each party. So a credit for the seller is going to be money that they get to walk away with at closing, and a seller debit is something that they don't get to walk away with at closing. On the flip side, credits are good for the buyer. It's something they don't have to bring to closing. Buyer debits are something that they do have to bring to closing. Price will be seller credit, buyer debit. Earnest money will be buyer credit, buyer loan amount, buyer credit, prepaid HOA, buyer debit, and seller credit. Early possession fee, buyer debit, seller credit. 2021 tax credit in Champaign County. Property taxes are paid a year in arrears, so this is going to be something these sellers are going to have to pay. So it's going to be a seller debit and a buyer credit. 2022 tax credit for what's accrued so far, the same thing. It's going to be a buyer credit and a seller debit. Seller's going to be on the hook for that. We're told here this is a credit to the buyer, USCS proration. It's going to be a credit to the buyer. On the flip side, debit to the seller. Seller title fees is going to be a debit to the seller. Buyer title fees is going to be debit to the buyer. Buyer title company closing fee, debit to the buyer. State revenue transfer tax in Illinois, you have to pay for the privilege of having your mortgage recorded, given to someone else. It's going to be a seller debit here. County charges a tax for the same thing. It's going to be a seller debit. Payoff, again, sellers obviously can't walk away with all that money. They have to pay off their mortgage. It's going to be a seller debit. Payoff wire fee, $30 fee that the seller's going to have to pay. It's seller debit. Listing broker commission, so the seller pays the broker and the listing broker and the selling broker. So it's going to be $11,000 for the listing broker, $11,000 for the selling brokers, both seller debits. Seller attorney fee, obviously a fee for the seller debit. These following things are all going to be buyer debits, expenses for the buyers. The lender's administration fee, the appraisal fee, credit report fee, prepaid interest, buyer insurance escrow deposit, and buyer property tax escrow deposit. Next, we have a buyer escrow adjustment. We're just told it's a reduction. It's a credit for the buyer. We have buyer lender credit. We're just told it's a buyer credit. Deed recording fee. It's going to be paid by the buyer. It's going to be a buyer debit. Mortgage recording fee, also buyer debit. Mortgage payoff release fee would get paid by the seller, be a seller debit. And the first year HOA insurance fee would be a buyer debit.